I was in Las Vegas some years ago to address the annual Farm Bureau meeting. And on my way to the hall, a fellow recognized me and asked what I was doing in Las Vegas. And I told him I was there, what I was there for. And he said, "What are a bunch of farmers doing in a place like Las Vegas?" And I couldn't resist. I said, "Buster, they're in a business that makes a Las Vegas crap table look like a guaranteed annual income."
Good morning. It's Thursday, January the 12th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have Squawk Box, No Free Lunch, The Rape of the Mind, Go the Distance, and Tucker-Carlson. All that and more when I get back. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Your hearts, face your parents, ready, begin.
Thank you. And now, There's No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
The existence of big government and progressive income taxes guarantees non-neutrality. With steeply progressive tax rates, inflation pushes taxpayers into higher and higher tax brackets, even at unchanged real incomes. Taxes have to be paid on interest receipts, even though the bulk of the high interest rates represent inflation premiums. Soaring tax revenues, coupled with government's high marginal propensity to spend, led to an increasing share of government in the economy. Robert A. Mundell. I suppose in a twisted way, one of the advantages of a steeper progression in tax rates was the audacity it highlighted in how inflation caused higher tax burdens without higher real incomes. At flatter but not flat tax rates, taxpayers are still exposed to the perversion of what Mundell describes here, yet with a subtlety and slowness to it that stems off needed outrage. Inflation and progressive tax rates, the policy prescription of the 1970s, are the worst combination of economic circumstances possible. Sound money and lower marginal rates drive prosperity.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now about 5 minutes with Tucker-Carlson about people getting very rich.
So this week, as promised, Republicans who now control the House set up a new committee modeled after the famous Frank Church Committee of the 70s to investigate the FBI and the intel agencies which are playing what appear to be decisive roles in American politics. Now, that's an offense against democracy. You can have a democracy in which government agencies secretly work to control the outcome. That's tyranny, of course. No decent person should want that. But Republicans, Democrats, rather than welcoming the scrutiny and the transparency, the sunlight, are responding with panic. Watch this.
Today, we have the first of their many demands on display, an open-ended investigation into whatever conspiracy theories may be headlining the right-wing echo chamber at the moment.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to H-Res 12, the Insurrection Protection Committee.
This is all about deep state nonsense.
Let's call it what it really is. The Republican Committee to Obstruct Justice.
Russia is one of our most dangerous adversaries. We're in the middle of a national security quagmire. And to undermine that through investigations of the FBI and Central Intelligence is going to be extremely dangerous.
The MAGA extremist fringe of the Republican Party will use this committee to push QAnon conspiracy theories and lies from Truth Social. They're going to use it to gin up fake investigations into non-existent scandals. I think we need to just start calling this the tinfoil hat committee.
Oh, so there's verification right there. If you're wondering if the federal agencies, FBI, CIA, and a bunch of others are actually being used as tools of the Democratic Party to change political outcomes, now we know for sure. Because if you're a government official and you are panicked at the idea that what you are doing will become public, you're doing something wrong, by definition. And it's not just the intel agencies whose behavior they want to keep secret. Democrats in Congress also don't want you to have any idea where the $100 billion went that we've sent to Ukraine. So we sent $100 billion to Ukraine, and then Condi Rice, who's still talking about foreign policy in public, amazingly, announces this weekend that Ukraine is losing. Okay, so where'd all the money go? Well, you can't know that. Went to Zelensky and his wife. What'd they do with it? This weekend, Joe Biden announced that we're going to send still more billions to Ukraine this month.
Today, we jointly announced, you've already gotten copies of it, a statement saying that we're going to increase the support for Ukraine. We are going to provide the Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, the United States, to the Ukrainians. And the Germans are going to provide the Marder infantry fighting vehicles that they have to the Ukrainians. And in addition, we're going to help defend Ukraine against Russian air attacks. Germany's also announced that today it's going to provide the Ukrainians to deal with the air attacks, a Patriot air defense system. We're going to provide an additional Patriot air defense battery.
This is crazy, but there's actually a reason for it. People are getting very rich from this. People are getting very rich from this. That's why Washington supports it. And very soon, we're going to give you a case study on who exactly is getting rich from it. Some of the people who are promoting this war that is killing an endless number of Ukrainians are personally benefiting from it, and you should know that. But the cost to us is profound. In fact, we're sending so much military equipment to Ukraine, to Zelensky and his wife, that we're running out of weapons for our own military to defend our own country. And that's not a guess. The Secretary of the Navy, Carlos del Toro, just said that out loud. Quote, with regards to deliveries of weapon systems for the fight in Ukraine, yeah, that's always a concern for us. If the conflict does go on for another 6 months or another year, it certainly continues to stress the supply chain in ways that are challenging. In other words, you can either defend Ukraine's borders or you can defend the United States of America. Which is it? Well, most members of Congress are choosing Ukraine, which tells you everything. But a small number are coming to their senses. In the House, Thomas Massie of Kentucky is one of them.
We've spent more in Ukraine, the U.S. Congress has, than we spend on all of our roads and bridges in an entire year. The entire infrastructure of this country, the roads and bridges, the real infrastructure, We don't spend as much on that here as we've spent on Ukraine in 9 months. I think that's despicable. Our priorities are all out of whack. And I'll finish with this. We're trying to get the documents here to find out where the money went. What we really need is a full audit.
So this is a crime against our country being perpetrated by the Democratic Party with the full buy-in of most Republicans. But a few have dissented. J.D. Vance just started in the U.S. Senate representing the state of Ohio. Subscribe.
So that was Tucker-Carlson and on a little clip on from YouTube about who's getting rich from the war in Ukraine. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Squawk Box. And there's some interesting things going on here. So we're going to play a little bit of this.
And cornhole sliders. It should be a crime to play cornhole without turkey sliders.
Its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried.
Let's try it again. Here we go.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. A fascinating new Substack post that was just put up by FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried, who's currently under house arrest, awaiting his trial on fraud and other charges. In it, he blames Binance CEO CZ for the collapse of Alameda Research, and he says a substantial recovery for FTX customers remains possible. It is, for those who are interested in crypto and interested in this entire saga, it's a lengthy post, goes into quite some detail about the math, makes a couple of fascinating arguments. One about customers of FTX US, saying that he believes that FTX US customers should be, quote, fully solvent and should be able to return all customer funds. One of the other fascinating notes of this is he comments on Sullivan and Cromwell, which is the law firm representing FTX in the bankruptcy. Recently, and he notes this as well, senators have raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest from Sullivan and Cromwell because they also represented FTX on some transactions earlier. And he says in this note that S&C, which is Sullivan and Cromwell, and the GC, General Counsel, were the primary parties strong-arming and threatening me into naming the candidate they themselves chose as CEO of FTX, including for a solvent entity in FTX US, who then filed for Chapter 11 and chose S&C as counsel to the debtor entity. So there's a whole sort of piece of this that's worth exploring. He goes through some quite interesting math just on what assets he believes are inside FTX International, which is important in terms of the creditors that are looking at this company, makes an argument that he believes that there's actually more assets there than have been at least articulated or described thus far, and we'll see.
We should put this in context. John Ray III, who's the new FTX CEO, who was brought in to oversee the bankruptcy and restructuring of all of this, has said that Sam Bankman-Fried, every time he goes in and starts talking about these things, has made substantially inaccurate and wildly crazy claims about these things, and that he's not telling the truth. I mean, this is the guy who was there for the Enron bankruptcy too, who says this is the craziest thing he's ever seen. So we should put it in that context, that whatever he's saying here, go tell it to the bankruptcy advisors, go tell it to the criminal proceedings that are being placed against him. But the guy who's in charge now says this is nuts.
Well, I'll accept that. I accept that as one version of the critique. I think there's another version of the critique in terms of when you just think about the motivations of everybody involved in this.
To interrupt here, he is this guy on Squawk Box. He's their lefty guy. First of all, nobody here is coming out and telling us what is their position on crypto. Do they like crypto? Do they not like crypto? I say that crypto, as a matter of common sense, there's a saying that you don't invest in anything you don't understand. I don't understand it. Bill Maher said, it's been explained to me 6 ways from Sunday. I still don't understand it, and nobody understands it. That the whole thing smells of fraud. Okay, all of crypto smells of fraud. So if he's the left, I believe, loves crypto because it's imaginary. It's got all this imagination things going, and because it's imaginary, it's unlimited. It has this potential for being unlimited, and if it's unlimited, it can do miraculous things. It can save the world. It can cure poverty. It can, cure cancer, whatever. They can put all their hopes and dreams into this imaginary currency, and I believe this guy that's talking about this now is on that side. He's a lefty. He likes crypto, and so he wants to believe Sam Bankman-Fried when he says, "I can restore everybody, make everybody whole again." But by the way, that's what all frauds say. It was Bernie Madoff said the same thing before they sent him to prison. Oh, I'll make sure everybody gets their money back. They never did. And so they're more than likely, in this particular case, everybody's going to end up eating it. The only people that are going to make any money off of this is going to be the lawyers, of course. So, but anyway, so he's on that side. I think he wants to believe in Sam Bankman-Fried because this whole SFX situation is a big black eye for crypto in general. And so he wants to believe in crypto. Therefore, he has to be on the side of Sam Bankman-Fried and believe that Sam Bankman-Fried is going to, make people solvent again and restore the good name of crypto. Not because he really likes Sam Bankman-Fried, but back to the conversation.
That two pieces on the Sullivan and Cromwell piece and the legal pieces of where the money is tied.
I don't think Sullivan and Cromwell should be involved.
But who the incentives are. And here's the other important incentive just to think about. It is very important if you are running this on behalf of the creditors, you would much prefer that this entire thing be a complete criminal enterprise than something else. If there's any element of that's civil, it's a much harder case to make. Meaning, if it's all a crime, this happens. Now having covered white-collar crime for 20 years, if it's all a crime, you as the shareholder have a much easier case to make to go get the money. If it's not a crime, it's much harder.
So here's the interesting thing that he's doing here. He says, after having covered white-collar crime for 20 years, he's appealing to credentials. There's no really, it's a really weak credential. It's not like saying, I have a bachelor's degree from Harvard University. I've been covering, and again, we have to take his word for it that he's been doing this for 20 years. So, but the way to counter that is with credentials, is with experience. And you come back and say, I've been watching TV, I've been around for X amount of years. He says he's been doing this for 20 years. You can say, I've been, if you're over 20 years old, then you can say, I've been around for 20 years. So you can always counter credentials with experience.
Harder case to make. I only
who
say
has
that
the biggest incentive in it not being all a crime? Sam Bankman-Fried.
100%. But I only say that because having lived through now so many of the cases, especially in the early aughts, one of the things you saw repeatedly were boards who would much prefer to accuse everybody of a crime. And I'm not saying Sam Bankman-Fried is innocent in this at all. That's not what I'm saying.
That's just it.
But I'm saying when you hear John Ray or others say what they say, I also, my antenna goes up on all of these people.
Okay, but
everybody has a motive on all sides of this.
What about the people who have now flipped and said that, yes, this was all a big scam and that
So the interesting thing that he said there is that everybody has a dog in this fight, so to speak. I'm paraphrasing, but he doesn't say where do you stand? Everybody has a dog in the fight, including you. This whole idea, this false objectivity. Objectivity exists, but it is expressed subjectively, as I've said before. So, and he needs to come out, if he wants to have any integrity or credibility, and tell everybody what his position is on this. What is he promoting? What is he demoting, etc.?
Way, They've said that they themselves are responsible for this stuff and are probably going to do jail time as based on their own admissions of what was going on there.
Oh, I think that they have their own incentives too, which is to say that some of them are worried about being prosecuted, some of them are worried about how long they would ultimately be sentenced. And my other point, I'm not saying everybody's guilty or not guilty.
This sounds like a conspiracy theory building, though. Do you buy into that?
No, I just think.
So again, this is, and this could be the last of it, is that, again, you hear him trying to have both sides on this thing. I'm not saying that they're guilty or not guilty. Well, why not? You're not neutral. There is no such thing as neutral. So never accept that from somebody. Somebody's trying to tell you something. They're trying to communicate something. They're trying to make a point. If they're not making a point, then they're babbling. So that's what you want to get to with these folks. What are you trying to say? And if they refuse to tell you, then you say, well, then you're just babbling. Have a nice day and walk away. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a book that I've had for a little while. It's called The Rape of the Mind, and it's all about how brainwashing and those types of things occur. And this particular chapter is called Witchcraft and Torture.
Torture. The specific techniques used in the modern world to break man's mind and will and to extort confessions for political propaganda purposes are relatively new and highly refined. Yet, enforced confession itself is nothing new. From time immemorial, tyrants and dictators have needed these voluntary confessions to justify their own evil deeds. The knowledge that the human mind can be influenced, tamed, and broken down into servility is far older than the modern dictatorial concept of enforced indoctrination. The primitive shaman used awe-inspiring ritual to bring his victim into such a state of fright hypnosis that he yielded to all suggestions. The native on whom a spell of doom has been cast by the medicine man may become so hypnotized by his own fear that he simply sits down, accepts his fate, and dies. Malinowski. Throughout history, men have had an intuitive understanding that the mind can be manipulated. Elaborate strategies have been worked out to achieve this end. Ecstasy rituals, frightening masks, loud noises, eerie chants, all have been used to compel the crowd to accept the beliefs of their leaders. Even if an ordinary man at first resists a cruel shaman or medicine man, the hypnotizing ritual gradually breaks his will. More painful methods are not new either. When we study the old reports of the Inquisition or of the many witch trials, both in Europe and America, we learn a great deal about these methods. The floating test is one example. Those accused of witchcraft were thrown into the river, their feet and hands tied together. If the body did not sink, the victim was immediately pulled out of the water and burned at the stake. The fact that he did not sink was proof positive of his guilt. If, on the other hand, the accused obeyed the law of gravity and sank to the bottom of the river, then the drowned body was ceremoniously removed from the river and proclaimed innocent. Not much choice was left to the victim. Man has been tremendously inventive in developing means for inflicting suffering on his fellow man. With refined passion, he has devised techniques which provoke the most exquisite pain in the most vulnerable parts of the human body. The rack and the thumbscrew are age-old instruments and have been used not only by primitive judges, but also by so-called civilized dictators and tyrants. In order better to understand modern mental torture, we must constantly keep in mind the fact that from the earliest days, bodily anguish and the rack were never meant merely to inflict pain on the victim. They might not have expressed their understanding in sophisticated terms, but the medieval judge and hangman were nevertheless aware that there is a peculiar spiritual relationship and mental interplay between the victim and the rest of the community. Much painful torture and hanging had to be done as public demonstrations. After suffering the most intense pain, the witch would not only confess to shocking sexual debaucheries with the devil, but would herself gradually come to believe the stories she had invented and would die, convinced of her guilt. The whole ritual of interrogation and torture finally compelled her to yield to the fantasies of her judges and accusers. In the end, she even yearned for death. She wanted to be burned at the stake in order to exorcise the devil and expiate her sins. These same judges and hangman realized, too, that their witch trials were intended not only to torture the witches, but even more to torture the bystanders who, albeit unconsciously, identified themselves with the victims. This is, of course, one of the reasons burnings and hangings were held in public and became the occasion for great pageants. Terror thus became widespread, and many judges spoke euphemistically of the preventative action of such torture. Psychologically, we can see this entire device as blackmailing of human sympathy and the general tendency to identify with others. As far back as 1563, the courageous Dutch physician Johannes Weir published his masterwork on delusions about demons, in which he states that the collective and voluntary self-accusation of older women, through which they exposed themselves to torture and death by their inquisitors, was in itself an act inspired by the devil, a trick of demons, whose aim it was to doom not only the innocent women, but also their reckless judges. Weir was the man to introduce what became the psychiatric concept of delusion and mental blindness. Wherever his book had influence, the persecution of witches ceased. In some countries, more than 150 years before it was finally brought to an end throughout the civilized world. His work and his insights became one of the main instruments for fighting the witch delusion and physical torture, Auschwitz. Weir realized even then that witches were scapegoats for the inner confusion and desperation of their judges and of the zeitgeist in general.
And that was Witchcraft and Torture from the book The Rape of the Mind by Joost Meerlo, MD. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. Until next time, remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.
I have often dreamed of a far-off place where a hero's welcome would be waiting for me, where the crowd